If you ever see a man walk into fire without hesitation, run, because he's not afraid of what's inside. The warehouse was already collapsing when I arrived, flames licking through the steel beams, smoke thick enough to choke the night. But I stepped out of the car anyway, ignoring the shouting behind me, because something felt wrong, because deals don't end like this unless someone made a mistake, and I don't tolerate mistakes. The heat hit me first, sharp and immediate, crawling under my skin as I crossed the threshold, my shoes grinding against debris, every breath tasting like ash. And then I heard it, faint, uneven, a sound that didn't belong to burning wood or cracking metal. A person. I followed it deeper, through shadows and orange light, until I saw her, barely visible against the concrete, her body curled in on itself like she'd tried to disappear, and for a second, everything slowed. She wasn't part of this. She couldn't be. I crouched beside her, close enough to feel the shallow rhythm of her breathing, and when I touched her shoulder, she didn't react, just stayed there, fragile and still in a place that was anything but. Wrong place, I muttered, more to myself than to her, already lifting her into my arms, her weight lighter than I expected, like she hadn't eaten in days, like life had already been hard before tonight. The way out felt longer on the way back, flames shifting, blocking paths that had been open seconds ago, but I moved through it, steady, controlled, because panic gets people killed, and I don't panic. Not anymore. When we finally broke into the night air, the cold hit like a shock, the noise rushing back all at once, men talking, engines idling, everything sharp and real again, but I barely heard any of it. She stirred then, just slightly, enough for her hand to slip against my chest, her sleeve falling back an inch, maybe less, but it was enough. I saw it. Ink against pale skin. Clean lines. Familiar in a way that made something inside me go still. My grip tightened before I could stop it, my mind pulling at memories I'd buried years ago. Memories tied to a symbol I never expected to see again. Not here, not on her. She shifted. Again, her eyes fluttering open, confusion and fear colliding in a single breath as she looked at me like I was the danger, and maybe I was, because everything had just changed. Where did you get that? I asked, my voice quieter now, controlled in a different way, and she didn't answer, just stared at me like she didn't understand the question, like she didn't understand what she was holding in her own skin. And that's when I knew this wasn't over, not even close, because the fire wasn't the real problem tonight. She was. She kept looking at me like I was the danger, like I had pulled her out of one nightmare just to drop her into another. And maybe she was not wrong, because the moment I saw that mark on her wrist, nothing about this was random anymore. Nothing about her was safe to ignore, and I do not ignore things that come back from the past uninvited. I set her down carefully against the side of the car, the metal still warm from the engine, my hand lingering for half a second longer than necessary before I pulled away, because control matters, especially when something unexpected shows up in your arms. Look at me, I said, not raising my voice, not needing to, and she did, reluctantly, her breathing uneven, eyes searching mine like she was trying to understand what kind of man I was, what kind of situation she had just been pulled into. I do not know, she whispered before I could even ask again, her voice raw, like she had already guessed the question, like she had been asked things her whole life without answers to give. My gaze dropped to her wrist again, to the ink that should not exist outside of a world most people pretend is not real, clean lines, deliberate design, not something you get by accident, not something you forget. That is not possible, I said quietly, more to myself than to her, because symbols like that do not just appear on people who collapse in burning buildings. They are given, they are earned, or they are inherited, and none of those options made sense standing here in the cold night air with her shaking in front of me. Around us, my men kept their distance, but I could feel their attention, waiting for instructions, waiting for me to decide if she was a problem or something else entirely. And the truth was, I had already decided, even if I had not said it out loud yet. You are coming with me, I said, and her expression shifted immediately, fear sharpening into resistance, like she had just found enough strength to push back. No, she said, shaking her head, trying to stand on her own, but her legs were not steady, her body still catching up to everything it had just survived. I just want to go home. Home. The word hung there between us, fragile and naive, and for a second, I almost let it pass, almost let her believe she still had that option, but the image of that mark burned in my mind, pulling me back to a place I had spent years trying to forget. Home is not where you are going tonight, I replied, my tone calm, final, leaving no room for argument. And she heard it. I could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, in the way her eyes flicked past me like she was calculating distance, exits, chances. I did not do anything, she said, quieter now, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I stepped closer, just enough that she had to look up again, just enough that the space between us felt intentional. That is exactly the problem, I said, my gaze locking onto hers, steady, unyielding. You do not even know what you are carrying. And as the wind shifted, carrying the last traces of smoke into the night, I realized something I had not felt in a long time. Not fear, not doubt, something sharper, something colder. Recognition. And recognition means history. And history never stays buried for long. She did not fight when they opened the car door for her, but she did not relax either. Her body held tight like she was bracing for something she could not see yet. And I watched it all from the other side as I slid into the seat beside her, the door closing with a quiet final sound that always meant the same thing. There was no going back to whatever came before. The engine started, smooth, controlled, just like everything else in my world. And as the car pulled away from the burning warehouse, the reflection of the flames faded from the window, replaced by darkness and passing streetlights that painted brief flashes across her face. She kept her hands close to her chest at first, like she was trying to hide them, but then slowly, almost without realizing it, her fingers drifted back to her wrist, touching the mark again, tracing it like she had done it 1,000 times before, and that small movement told me more than anything she had said. She did not know what it meant, but she felt it. How long have you had it? I asked, my voice low, steady, not accusing, just precise, and she hesitated before answering, her eyes flicking toward me and then away again, like even speaking about it made her uneasy. As long as I can remember, she said quietly, and that was enough to tighten something in my chest that I had not allowed myself to feel in years, because marks like that do not stay untouched for long unless someone made sure they did. I leaned back slightly, studying her in the dim light, taking in details I had missed before, the way her expression shifted between confusion and fear, the way she kept looking at the door like she was measuring her chances, the way she did not ask who I was, not directly, like some part of her already understood the answer would not help her. Do you remember who gave it to you? I continued, and this time she shook her head almost immediately, a small, quick movement that felt honest, not rehearsed. No, I thought it was just something from when I was a kid. I never questioned it. Her voice faded at the end, uncertainty creeping in, like the ground beneath her understanding was starting to shift, and I could see the moment it happened, the exact second she realized this was not normal, that this was not just a random detail in her life, that it meant something bigger. The car turned onto a quieter road, the city noise fading into distance, and silence settled between us, not empty, but heavy, filled with questions neither of us had answers to yet. I let it stretch for a moment, because silence reveals more than pressure ever could, and when she finally spoke again, her voice was softer, almost careful. Why are you asking me this? There it was, the question that mattered, not who I was, not where we were going, but why her, and I held her gaze this time, not looking away, not softening the truth even if I was not giving all of it yet. Because that mark, I said slowly, my words measured, deliberate, does not belong to someone who just walks away from a fire. Her brows pulled together, confusion deepening, but underneath it, I saw something else now, something sharper, awareness beginning to form, and she lowered her hand from her wrist like touching it suddenly felt different, like it no longer belonged to her the way she thought it did. The car slowed as we approached the gates, tall, silent, opening before us without question, and as we passed through, I realized something I could not ignore anymore, something that had been building since the moment I saw that ink against her skin. This was not coincidence. And whatever had started tonight was not going to end with her walking away. The gates closed behind us without a sound, and she felt it. I could see it in the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes moved quickly across the tall walls, the long driveway, the quiet kind of place that did not need to prove anything to anyone. And that was when reality started to settle in for her, slow but heavy, like a weight pressing down on everything she thought she understood about her night. The car came to a smooth stop in front of the house, lights already on, doors already open, everything prepared before we even arrived. Because this is how my world works. Nothing is left to chance. Nothing is unplanned, except her. She hesitated when the door opened, her body staying still for a second too long, like stepping out would make this real in a way she could not undo. And I gave her that second, just one, before I stepped out myself, forcing the moment forward without saying a word. "Come on," I said, not harsh, not soft, just certain, and she followed, because she did not have another option, not one that would make sense right now. Inside, the air was different, warmer, quieter, controlled, the chaos of the fire completely gone, replaced by something steady, something that made people lower their voices without being told to. She looked around like she did not know where to focus, taking in everything and understanding nothing, and I watched her do it, because how she reacted mattered more than anything she could say. "You can sit," I said, gesturing toward the couch, and she did, slowly, carefully, like she was afraid of breaking something she could not afford, or maybe afraid of what would happen next. I stayed standing for a moment, giving her space, giving myself a clear view, and then I moved closer, not too close, just enough to remind her I was there, that I was the reason she was here. "I need to see it again," I said, my gaze dropping briefly to her wrist, and she froze, her fingers tightening instinctively, covering the mark like it had suddenly become something she needed to protect. And that reaction told me everything I needed to know. She might not understand it, but she felt the importance now. "Why?" she asked, her voice quieter than before, less defiant, more uncertain, and I held her gaze, not looking away, not giving her an easy answer. "Because it is not random," I said, each word steady, grounded, "and neither are you." She hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly, she lowered her hand, revealing the ink again under the soft light, and this time I stepped closer, close enough to see every line clearly, close enough to confirm what I already knew but did not want to admit yet. It was the same, not similar, not close, the same. My jaw tightened just slightly, the only sign of the shift happening inside me, and I reached out, not grabbing, not forcing, just holding her wrist gently, turning it a fraction to catch the light, and for a second, everything else disappeared. Not the room, not the house, just that mark. "You said you do not remember," I said quietly, more focused now, more precise. "But someone remembers you." Her breath caught, just a small hitch, but enough, and her eyes searched mine again, this time not just for answers, but for truth. "What does it mean?" she asked, and there it was, the question she could not avoid anymore, the one that would pull her deeper whether she wanted it or not. I released her wrist slowly, stepping back just enough to create space again, because answers have weight, and she was not ready for all of it yet. "It means," I said, my voice lower now, controlled in a different way, "you were never supposed to disappear." And the silence that followed was not empty. It was the kind that changes everything, because once something is seen, it cannot be unseen, and once a truth starts to surface, it does not stop. She did not speak right away, and that silence stretched between us, heavier now, filled with something neither of us could pretend was simple anymore. Because once a question like that is asked, it does not disappear just because the answer is uncomfortable. She looked down at her wrist again, but this time it was different, not casual, not absent, her fingers hovering above the mark like she was seeing it for the first time, like it had changed just because I said it meant something more. "I would remember something like that," she said finally, her voice quieter, less certain than before, like she was trying to hold on to a version of her life that still made sense. I watched her carefully, not interrupting, not pushing, because doubt needs space to grow, and I needed her to reach that point on her own. "You remember what you were told," I replied after a moment, my tone steady, not unkind, just honest in a way she was not used to. "That is not always the same as what actually happened." Her eyes lifted back to mine, searching again, but this time there was something else behind it, something sharper, a need to understand, even if it scared her. "Then tell me," she said, a little stronger now, like she was choosing to step forward instead of back. "What happened?" I exhaled slowly, not because I did not know what to say, but because I knew exactly how much I should not say yet, Because the truth is not something you hand to someone all at once, not when it can change everything they believe about themselves. I turned slightly, reaching for the glass of water on the table, offering it to her without a word, and she took it, her fingers brushing mine for a second, colder than they should have been, and I made a mental note of it, because details matter. There was a time, I began, my voice lower now, quieter, not for secrecy, but because some things are not meant to be said loudly. When people like me did not just build power, we protected it. We marked it, we made sure it could not be taken or forgotten. She frowned slightly, confusion deepening, but she did not interrupt this time, which told me she was listening, really listening now. That mark, I continued, my eyes returning to her wrist, was never meant to be decoration. It was a signal, a connection, something that tied one life to another. Her hand tightened slightly around the glass, her knuckles paling, and I could see the moment the idea started to form. Incomplete, but undeniable. To who? She asked, almost immediately, the question slipping out before she could stop it. And there it was again, that instinct to find something solid to hold on to. I held her gaze, not looking away, not softening what came next, even if I was still holding part of it back. That is what we are going to find out, I said, each word deliberate, final in a way that left no room for this to end here. She stared at me for a second longer, her breathing uneven again, but not from fear this time. Something else, something closer to realization. And then she looked away, her gaze drifting toward the window, toward the darkness outside, like she was trying to measure how far she had already come from whatever her normal used to be. I did not ask for any of this, she said quietly, almost to herself, and I understood that more than she realized, because no one ever asks for the past to come back, it just does. I stepped back slightly, giving her space again, because she needed it, because this was the point where everything begins to shift, slowly at first, then all at once. It does not matter what you asked for, I said, my voice calm, grounded, not unkind but not gentle either. It matters what finds you. And as she sat there, holding that glass like it was the only steady thing left, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever had been hidden in her life was not hidden anymore, and neither of us was walking away from what came next. The room felt quieter. After that, not because the world had slowed down, but because everything inside it had shifted, and she could feel it. I could see it in the way she sat now, not as rigid, not as defensive, but not relaxed either, like she was caught somewhere in between holding on and letting go. She set the glass down carefully, her fingers lingering on the edge like she needed that extra second before facing whatever came next, and then she looked at me again, not with fear this time, but with something closer to resolve. If this is real, she said slowly, choosing each word like it mattered, then why me? It was a simple question, but it carried weight, the kind that does not have easy answers, and for a moment, I did not respond, not because I could not, but because I needed to see how far she was willing to go on her own. People do not get marked without a reason, I said finally, my voice steady, grounded, and they do not stay hidden unless someone made sure they were. Her brows pulled together again, but this time it was not confusion alone, it was frustration, the kind that comes when the pieces are right in front of you but refuse to fit together. You keep talking like I am part of something I do not even know exists, she said, her tone sharper now, a flicker of that earlier resistance returning, but underneath it, I could hear it, the shift. She was no longer denying, she was trying to understand. I stepped closer again, not to intimidate, but to narrow the distance between what she knew and what she needed to see. That is exactly what you are, I replied, my gaze locking onto hers, unwavering. And the longer you pretend you are not, the more dangerous it becomes. The word hung there for a second, not loud, not dramatic, just present, and she felt it. I could see it in the way her breath caught, the way her shoulders tensed just slightly, like her instincts were finally catching up to reality. Dangerous for who? She asked, quieter now, more careful. And that was the question that mattered, not what it was, but who it affected. I exhaled slowly, my eyes drifting briefly toward the window, toward the darkness beyond it, where the world continued moving, without knowing what had just been set in motion. For you, I said, turning back to her, my tone lower now, more certain. And for anyone who realizes what that mark means. She did not look away this time. Even as the meaning settled in, even as the weight of it pressed into the space between us, and I saw it again, that same thing I noticed in the fire, not weakness, not fragility, but something quieter, something that does not break easily, even when it should. Then why am I still here? She asked, her voice steady now, more controlled, like she was testing the edges of her situation instead of reacting to it. And I almost smiled at that, not because it was amusing, but because it confirmed what I already suspected. She was not just going to accept this, she was going to push back, to question, to demand something solid to stand on. Because you walked into my world tonight, I said, simple, direct, and I do not let things like that walk out without understanding them first. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to argue, to say something about choice or freedom or anything that would give her control back, but the words did not come, because deep down, she already knew this was bigger than that. I stepped back again, giving her room, but not distance, never distance, because distance creates escape, and that was not something I was offering. Get some rest, I added, my voice softer now, not as an order, not entirely, but close enough. Tomorrow, we start finding answers. She looked at me for a second longer, searching for something she could trust, something she could hold on to, and then she nodded, just once, small but real, and as she leaned back against the couch, her hand drifting once more to her wrist, I knew one thing had already changed. She was not trying to ignore it anymore, and that was the moment everything truly begins. The house did not sleep, it never did, but that night felt different, quieter in a way that did not come from silence, but from anticipation, like something unseen had shifted just enough to put everything on edge, and I felt it before I even opened my eyes. I had not gone far, just the room across the hall, close. Enough to hear movement if there was any, because trust is not something I give easily, and she had not earned it yet, not fully, not with that mark still unanswered. I stepped into the hallway, the floor cool under my feet, the low lights casting long shadows that stretched toward the living room, and that was when I saw her, not asleep, not resting, but standing by the window exactly where I left her, her reflection faint against the glass as she stared out into the darkness like it might give her something back. She did not turn when I approached, but I knew she heard me, her shoulders tightening just slightly, that instinct still there, alert, aware, and I respected that more than she probably realized. You should be resting, I said, my voice low, not breaking the quiet, just existing within it, and she let out a slow breath, her hand already on her wrist again, like it had become something she could not stop touching. I tried, she replied, her voice softer now, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. But every time I close my eyes, I see the fire, and then I see this. She lifted her wrist slightly, not turning, not looking at me, just holding it there like it belonged to someone else, like it had become a question she could not escape. I stepped closer, not too close, just enough to stand beside her, both of us facing the same dark glass, the same empty stretch of night beyond it. Your mind is trying to connect things, I said, calm, measured. It does not like gaps. She let out a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it, just disbelief, just the weight of everything pressing in at once. There are too many gaps, she said, turning slightly now, her eyes finding mine again, searching, always searching, and you keep telling me they matter, but you are not telling me why. I held her gaze, steady, unshaken, because she deserved something, not everything, but something real. Because once you understand it, I said slowly, choosing each word with care, you do not get to go back to not knowing. The words settled between us, heavy, final in a way that made her swallow hard, and I saw it again, that moment of choice, the same one. From earlier, the same line she kept approaching without fully crossing. Maybe I do not want to go back, she said after a second, quieter now, but stronger underneath, and that was new. That was the shift, not fear, not confusion, but something closer to decision. I studied her for a moment, longer than necessary, because that kind of change does not happen by accident, and when it does, it matters. Then you need to understand something first, I said, my tone dropping just slightly, not threatening, but firm enough to hold her attention completely. People do not look for things like that unless they have already lost them. Her expression flickered, Confusion again, but sharper this time, more focused, like she was starting to connect something just out of reach. Lost what? She asked, almost immediately, and I exhaled slowly, my gaze drifting back to her wrist, to the mark that had already rewritten the night. Someone, I answered quietly, and for the first time, I saw it clearly, not just confusion, not just fear, but something deeper, something that did not belong to the present alone. Recognition, not in her mind yet, but somewhere beneath it, waiting. And that was when I realized the truth I had been avoiding since the moment I saw that ink in the fire. This was not about finding answers anymore. It was about remembering something that had never truly disappeared. The word stayed between us longer than it should have, not loud, not dramatic, just there, like something that had been waiting years to be said out loud, and she felt it. I could see it in the way her posture changed, the way her hand slowly dropped from her wrist like touching it suddenly made everything too real. Someone, she repeated, quieter this time, like she was testing how it sounded, like saying it might unlock something she could not quite reach yet. I did not respond immediately, because moments like this are fragile. They do not need to be rushed, they need to unfold, piece by piece, until the truth finds its own way to the surface. She turned away from the window then, finally breaking that invisible line she had been holding on to, and walked a few steps into the room. Slower this time, more deliberate, like every movement now carried weight. If that is true, she said, her voice steadier than before, but not fully calm, then why do I not remember anything? It was the right question, the one that matters more than any symbol or connection, because memory is what makes things real, and without it, everything feels like someone else's story. I watched her carefully, not just what she said, but how she held herself, how she processed each word, and I saw it again, that quiet strength that does not disappear even when everything else starts to fall apart. Because sometimes, I said slowly, my voice lower now, measured, forgetting is not an accident. Her eyes lifted to mine instantly, sharp, alert, catching onto that one detail like it changed everything, and in a way, it did. You mean someone made me forget? She asked, and there was something new in her tone now. Not just confusion, not just fear, but something closer to anger, controlled but present, like a line had been crossed somewhere in a life she could not remember. I held her gaze, steady, not confirming too quickly, not denying it either, because the truth does not need to be forced when it is already forming. I mean, someone had a reason to keep you hidden, I replied, letting the words settle exactly where they needed to, and she turned slightly, pacing now, just a few steps, back and forth, her mind trying to catch up with something her instincts were already starting to understand. Hidden from who? She asked, stopping abruptly, her voice sharper this time, more direct, and that was when I stepped forward again, closing the distance just enough to bring her focus back to me. From people who would recognize that mark, I said, my tone calm but firm. People who would not ask questions first. She went still after that, completely still, like even moving might make it worse, and her hand rose again, almost unconsciously, hovering over her wrist without touching it this time, like she was afraid of what it represented now. And you, she said slowly, her eyes narrowing just slightly, not in fear, but in realization. You recognized it. There it was, the shift. The moment she stopped being pulled through the story and started stepping into it, and I did not look away, not even for a second. Yes, I answered, simple, direct, because anything else would have been a lie she would see through anyway. Her breath hitched, just slightly, and I saw it again. Not just fear, not just confusion, but something deeper, something pulling at her from beneath the surface, like a memory that had not fully formed but refused to stay buried. Then you know who I am, she said, her voice quieter now, but more certain than anything she had said before, and I held her gaze for a long second, longer than necessary, because this was the moment everything could change depending on what I said next. No, I replied finally, my voice steady, but lower now, carrying something heavier underneath, but I know you are not supposed to be alive. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute, not empty, but filled with the weight of something neither of us could ignore anymore, because whatever she had been before tonight was gone, and whatever she was now had just begun to surface. The words did not break the silence, they deepened it, pulling everything into a place that felt heavier, colder, more real than anything she had faced so far, and she stood there without moving, without blinking, like her mind had not caught up to what she had just heard. But her body had. "That does not make sense," she said finally, her voice quieter now, not defensive, not even questioning, just trying to hold on to something that still felt logical, something that still belonged to the life she remembered. I did not interrupt her, because logic was the first thing that would fall apart, and she needed to feel that shift on her own. "I have a life," she continued, her words coming slower, more uncertain with each breath. "I have memories, places, people, things that are real." She looked at me then, searching for contradiction, for reassurance, for anything that would anchor her, but I did not offer either, because the truth does not anchor, it destabilizes first. "I am not saying those things are not real," I said, my tone steady, controlled. "I am saying they might not be complete." Her expression tightened, just slightly, like something inside her resisted that idea, but could not fully reject it either, and I saw it again, that fracture beginning to form between what she knew and what she was starting to understand. "You are telling me someone erased part of my life," she said, her voice firmer now, holding on to the structure of the thought, even if it scared her, "and marked me for something I do not remember, and now people are looking for me because of it." I held her gaze, not softening, not correcting, because she had already put the pieces together in a way that mattered. "Yes," I said simply, and that single word settled into the space between us like a final confirmation, not dramatic, not loud, just undeniable. She turned away again, pacing this time with more urgency, her steps quicker, her breathing uneven, not from panic, but from realization, and I let her move, because this was the moment where everything shifts, where denial gives way to something sharper, something more dangerous. "Then why now?" she asked suddenly, stopping mid-step, turning back to me with a look that was no longer confused, no longer uncertain, but focused, direct. Why did this start tonight? It was the right question, the one I had been asking myself since the fire, and I stepped closer again, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving with purpose. "Because something changed," I said, my voice lower now, carrying weight, "and whatever was keeping you hidden is not working anymore." Her eyes flickered at that, not with fear, but with understanding, incomplete but growing, and her hand rose once more to her wrist, this time pressing lightly against the mark like she was grounding herself in it instead of avoiding it. "And they know," she said quietly, almost to herself, but I heard it clearly, and I nodded once, slow, deliberate. "Yes," I replied, my gaze steady on hers, "and they will not stop looking." The room felt smaller after that, not physically, but in the way reality closes in when there are no more simple explanations left, and she stood there, not shrinking, not retreating, but holding her ground in a way that confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. She was not just part of this, she was central to it. "Then I need to know everything," she said, her voice firm now, not asking, not hesitating, just stating what came next, and for the first time since the fire, I allowed a small shift in my expression, not quite approval, not quite acceptance, but something close. "You will," I said, stepping back just enough to give her space, but not distance, never distance, but not all at once. She held my gaze for a second longer, like she wanted to argue, to push further, but she did not, because she understood now, this was not something she could force. "Then where do we start?" she asked, quieter now, but still steady, and I looked at her wrist one more time, at the mark that had already rewritten everything, before meeting her eyes again. "We start," I said, my voice calm, grounded, certain, with the last place that mark was supposed to exist. And as the words settled, I knew this was no longer about uncovering the past. It was about walking straight into it, together, whether she was ready or not.